Hello, governors, and welcome back to Power Squared. Today, we are joined by our very own Charles. He's going to be showing us his Microsoft Learn Extractor solution. So, Charles, take it away. Tell us what it is.
Thanks, Josh. It's funny to be introduced on my own show. It's really cool. um, so the Microsoft Learn Extractor solution is something that came up as a need when I was working with a client, and I realized that it's something that's very useful for basically everyone who's wanting to track what people know and what they've learned within Microsoft Learn. So it might be that you want to track people's certifications because you're a Microsoft partner and certifications are really important. It might be that you've got citizen developers or makers, as they're called nowadays, within Power Platform, and you want to track what they know because you want to give them more privileges if they know more. And there are many different reasons. So on my blog, it's the latest post at the moment, Microsoft Learn Extractor Solution. It's on charlessexton.com. And I actually said, why did I build it? So one of the reasons being governance. So you want to know about what a maker has learned. And the other one being a skills database. So tracking what your developers know. So you have a database as to, okay, this developer has learned about Copilot Studio. So if we have a question on Copilot Studio, we can go to them, that kind of thing. And then another one being gamification. So when you're recording all of this data, you can then create comparisons against people. Of course, you don't want to compare them in a negative light, but more in the case of who has completed the most Microsoft Learn modules this week, that kind of thing. And it will encourage people to learn because they'll want to reach the top of that leaderboard. Maybe they get a badge or a prize or something like that for it.
Yeah, I can definitely see the kind of premise of this and how it would work. It's really interesting to me, and particularly from a governance lens, see the value in this, being able to track those things and maybe letting users access certain aspects of Power Platform or, Copilot, for example. Once they've completed certain modules, you can kind of track that and kind of integrate that into, your compliance platforms or whatever workflow you're using. So it looks great. Why don't we jump in and see what it looks like as a kind of live demo? Could you do that with us?
Yeah, sure. So on the blog post, I've got how can you use it, and it goes through that bit, and I'll demo that now. And I've also got where can you get it, and it's available on GitHub, and I'll go through that in a second as well. So how you actually get to it, but we'll just do the demo as to how do you use it first. So I included a Canvas app in the solution. So this is the entire solution, all of the components within it. I provide it as an unmanaged solution and a managed solution, but I would recommend downloading the unmanaged solution. It then means that you can modify it to your heart's content, which is probably what you want to do. So this is the Canvas app that I've included in it. It's just a single page, a single screen. All you do is you provide your transcript code that you get from Microsoft Learn. And then when you click on Send Transcript, it will extract all of the data from Microsoft Learn that we see here. So it will get your Microsoft Learn email address because it needs your email address to know who is the person who has the particular skill, certification, or module that they've completed. And this is all of the data that it saves. So it's your applied skills, it's your certifications, and it's your completed modules. And that's it. So it's nothing crazy, but very useful information.
And did I hear you right in that you're providing this for free to the community?
Yep, that's right.
Wow.
Yeah, I wanted it to be available to everyone because I think that it's something that's incredibly useful, and I just felt like it was the right thing to do. Valentin probably inspired me quite a bit in doing that because he's provided so many tools. Patrix.io is his website. He's got so many tools for free, and I feel like it's only fair for me to provide something as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, we've obviously had Valentin on our show previously, and some of the things that he's developed been fantastic as well. So yeah, it's good to see others giving back to the community too. But this is really great. The amount of information that you can extract from this is quite comprehensive, isn't it?
Yeah, there is a bit more information as well, but I'm just bringing through what I think is the most important.
Yeah, and I can see how others could maybe take this solution and expand on it and really make it into their own as well. And on that, because, I personally found it quite tricky in the past to get the information from Microsoft Learn, outside of any context or other than using, the Learn website. So how did you do it?
It's quite clever, actually. Not clever from me, but clever from artificial intelligence. So I basically spoke to one of the artificial intelligence models that I'm paying for, and I asked it to do some deep research on Microsoft Learn and see whether there was any way that we could automate getting that data out of there. And it actually discovered an undocumented API. And that's what I'm using in order to get the data. What I'll do first is I'll show a quick demo of it. So I'm on Microsoft Learn here. I've gone to my profile. So up in the top right-hand corner, you've got your profile there. If you click on that, it will bring you through to your profile. And then on the left-hand side, you've got transcript. And then you click on that, wait a little bit, and it will load. It doesn't tend to load instantly. And then within your transcript, you've got this share link. And with this share link, you can then just copy that. You just do copy link. And then we can go back to the app and just paste in that link. And all the app is going to do, all it cares about is that ID, that reference. And it's going to take that and it's going to send that to the undocumented API. And that API is going to return all of this information in JSON format. So I'll click on send transcript and we'll see what happens. So it takes a little while for it to go through things because it's, of course, communicating with Microsoft Learn. It's iterating through everything and saving it. There's quite a few things that it does, and we can look into that. But it saved everything to Dataverse now, and it's telling us how many modules I've completed, how many certifications I've got, and how many applied skills I've got. And as far as the certifications are concerned, it will bring through only the active certifications.
It's really good. So you're able to track all this really easily using this app. And I can, already got ideas in my head of how you could possibly integrate this into, a learning module or, create your own kind of larger app where you can track users, modules, applied skills and make pathways for them. So this is really useful. I can really see the value in this for, users and what they've completed in their training and whatnot and their journey through Microsoft, not just Power Platform, because it's going to cover other things as well, right? It's not just Power Platform specific. There you'll be able to see all of their modules, all of their certifications, all their applied skills and more.
Yeah, exactly. Everything in Microsoft Learn that is within the parts that we've talked about that we're saving. But what you really want to do once you've run it for one user, at least, once you've got some data, is you want to go to the solution and you want to have a look at the data that's really stored, right? Because you want to know, like, what can I do with this data? How can I use it? Because it's one thing to store the data, it's another thing to actually turn that into something useful and usable. So, as I was saying before, one of the ways that you could do that is maybe you have something that you need to ask a colleague about. You would then have this skills database where you could go and check like who has done the applied skill for Power Apps, and then you can find the person for that particular skill. Or with the certifications, maybe you need to know that someone has passed a particular certification before they get a certain type of freedom, or maybe for a promotion even. It can work from an HR perspective. And then say for Learn modules, with Learn modules, it's a much more granular thing. So it might be that you're looking for someone who's done something very specific. Like you can see I started working on these in January 2022. That's when I started my Power Platform journey. So for me, it's quite interesting going back to this point. If it's run for anyone, they'll get this data on themselves. And yeah, we can see like I was looking at Dynamics 365 sales. So I passed a Learn module for that. So yeah, you get a ton of information here that you can then integrate into whichever system you want it integrated into, because it's all stored in Dataverse, and then you can actually get the value from it.
It's really nice. Yeah, you can see how clear and easy it is to use this data and do whatever you need to do with it. You could even put this in a Power BI report if you wanted to. There's lots of different ways you can now use the data. You've got it really clearly structured, so that's great. I'm really interested to see how you actually bring this data into here. Do you want to run us through kind of a bit of the behind the scenes, if you will?
Yeah, of course. So there's an environment variable, which is your organization URL. That's basically the URL for your Dataverse environment, which is one that when you're importing the solution, you'll need to provide it, and you can find it in your session details like this. So you've got your instance URL. So that's your URL that you'd be providing to it. And that's essentially what we're calling in order to do the upserting of data. Upserting is basically you're going to insert the data if it doesn't exist. If it does exist, you're going to update it. So let's say that someone has passed a certification and the next day that certification has expired. The upsert will change the certification to mark it as expired. And then, of course, we have a couple of connection references, which is pretty straightforward. So we've got one for Dataverse because we need to communicate with Dataverse, and we've got one for the HTTP request connector. And I'll show why we've got that when we look at the flows. So there are two flows. There's a parent flow and a child flow. So let's get those opened up and then I'll explain what they're doing. All right, so we've loaded the parent flow here. So this gets called from Power Apps at the moment. You can, of course, change that to however you want it to get called. The very first thing we do is we go to that undocumented API that I talked about. So it's learn.microsoft.com/API. So that's where you can see that it is an API endpoint, and we're asking for the transcript. So that's where we pass in the ID from the transcript. So that's pretty straightforward. Once we've done that, we get back a load of JSON data. And the very first things we do are we count the different certifications, applied skills, and completed modules, because we want to provide the counts of those to the user in the app, which is what we saw here with those numbers. So the way that we count those is pretty straightforward. We're just saying, like, what's the length of the certification? So what's the count of it? So it's really, really simple code. Anyone can understand it. And then we get that information and we send it back to the app so that it can be displayed. And at the very same time that we do that, we run the child flow. And with the child flow, we pass it all of the JSON Microsoft Learn data that we got. And we also pass it the user's ID. We send through the user's ID so that we can then match up that Microsoft Learn email, because we don't know which user that actually belongs to, because the Microsoft email, of course, Microsoft Learn email, of course, is a personal email address. And what we have within our Microsoft tenant is going to be our organization, our company address. So we'll need to marry the two together. So we pass through the Entra ID through to here. All right, so that's the parent flow. So we're calling the child flow. So then what happens when we get to there? The very first thing that we do is we get the user's ID. And what we're doing is we're looking for their system ID from the system users table, because that's what we want to do in order to create the lookup. We don't want their Azure Entra ID, because that's not useful to us when we're patching to Dataverse. So we get that as the very first thing, and then we just initialize that. So we're just basically turning it into a variable so it's easier to work with. We're also turning the learn data into a variable. So we're converting that into a JSON object, because we had to pass that through to the child flow as text, because you can't pass an object through to the child flow. So we're just converting that back into a JSON object. And then we're also just grabbing the Microsoft Learn email address and creating that as a variable, just so it's easier to work with. So we've got all of our data together now. And we've got three different things that we need to do, because we've got three different types. We're doing our modules, we're doing our applied skills, and we're doing our certifications. And we do the same thing for each one. So if I open that up, the first thing we've got is this condition. And the condition is essentially saying, if we have completed modules, then we want to do something. Because if we don't, there's no point in sending that request back to Dataverse to say, add this stuff, because nothing exists. So then we perform a select on it. And the reason why we're performing a select on the information, so you can see it's the learn data here in the completed modules, we're performing the select on it because we need to manipulate that data structure to move it into the data structure that we want for our Dataverse table. So it has to be in the right structure for that. So we're saying, what's the type, which is basically what's the entity that we're going to be calling, which is the learn module. And then we've got all the different parts that we said that we were saving for it, like the title, description, and so on. And then right at the end, we've got this thing called OData bind. And the OData bind is where you want to create a lookup. So what we're doing is we're passing in the user's ID here inside the system users table. So we're creating that lookup to the system users table. And the reason why we've wrapped this in a string is because it has the @ symbol. If we didn't wrap it in a string, it would not be able to process the @ symbol. So there were lots of little gotchas as I was going through. There's things that I had to figure out. And one of those things is the string there. Another thing is the next part. So it's this OData ID. So this OData ID is essentially us saying, this is the alternate key for the table. So on a Dataverse table, you have a primary key, which is your GUID. So if your table is called, user, then your GUID would be user as well. It's usually named in that format. What we've done is we've created an alternate key because we don't know the GUID, but we want to perform an upsert. We want to basically say, insert this unless it exists. The way that we find out if it exists is through this alternate key. And the alternate key is using the user's Microsoft Learn email and their Learn module ID. So if the Learn module ID and the Microsoft Learn email exist in the database as one whole thing, then that's a key, and that says that we need to update the record. And if they don't exist, then of course we insert the record. But there were some gotchas with this side of things because it's so important how you name everything. The OData ID was fine, but when it came to concatenating this data, I needed to be really careful about whether I was using the logical name or the schema name and whether it was plural or not. And I finally figured everything out, and I was able to condense it into all of that. And then we can then send that to Dataverse. And this is where the HTTP request connector comes into things, because for this, we need to send this information to the Dataverse URL, and we're essentially performing a batch request or sending the data as batch. And what we need to pass through for that is all of that data that we put in the select. All of the information then gets sent through to that and should work nicely. And then all we have to do at the end is respond to say that everything's gone through, and that's job done. The parent flow then knows that the child flow has performed all of its tasks correctly. And if I go back, then we can have a look at the runs for this. And you can see that it only takes 12 seconds to run. It's very quick. So 11 seconds were for the modules, which was almost 300 modules. So of course it takes a bit longer, but yeah, generally it's extremely quick to process everything.
That's really cool. And you can see the amount of detail that you've had to go into to get that information out and kind of wrangle the APIs to get what you need. So that's really cool and really insightful actually to see how this has been put together to get the end result. So yeah, that's great. Is there anything else you want to cover?
I think the next thing really is just about, well, there are two more things. So one is about, well, what should you do with it? So it starts off with this flow where you've got a trigger, you pass it your transcript ID and enter ID. I'm doing that from within this app, so you can edit the app and you can look at the code and the way that I'm sending it through, and you can do exactly the same thing in your own app if you want to integrate it into your own software. Or you could call the flow another way, but basically that's the way that you can then integrate it into your processes. So you could even have a Teams adaptive card that says, paste your transcript URL in here. This is how you find it, and you send it out to all the users where you want it. Of course, you have to be aware of like privacy concerns and things like that. Users need to be able to decide whether they're happy to share that information because it's their information. But assuming that they are, then yeah, you could do it through a Teams adaptive card and you can get a load of data that you can then understand how to better manage your organization as far as not just Power Platform, of course, but like, as you said, this covers the Azure certifications and all of the certifications like Dynamics 365 and beyond. So the other thing that I wanted to show is just to do with the installation. So I've put all of the data, so the unmanaged solution and the managed solution zip files on GitHub, and they're available for anyone to take, along with the GPL 3.0 license. So it's an open source software, so you can take it and just about do whatever you want with it. I go through what the prerequisites are, which are important because you need to be able to use that HTTP pre-authorized connector. So you need to make sure that DLP policies are not blocking that, as well as the HTTP request connector. And you need to make sure that you've got premium licenses if you're saving into Dataverse. You could, of course, change the solution if you wanted to, so that it saves the data into SharePoint or a SQL database or wherever you want, even a spreadsheet if you're that crazy. And then I go into details as to the solution. So what's it made up of and what is the purpose of everything, so that it's as clear as it possibly can be. And then for the installation, and the installation is pretty straightforward. It's just really to do with when you're doing your connections that you need to create a connection with your Dataverse URL, which I showed earlier how to get to through your session. And then you enter that same URL for the environment variable, and that's it. And then you just use it and enjoy. and it's pretty straightforward, actually.
Yeah, and we'll include the links to the GitHub repo and your blog as well in the video description, so that our viewers can find all the information they need, and they can go download, install, and just have a kind of fiddle about as well by themselves. So yeah, it's really cool. Any closing comments from yourself, Charles, before we close up?
Very last comment is to all of the viewers who are planning on using this. When you do use it, I would love to hear how you're using it and how it's useful for you. And you can put that in the comments on YouTube. You can contact us via LinkedIn, however you want to do it. It'd be really good to know like what people are doing with this and is it providing value? And also, if you have any suggestions to improve it, I'm always open to that kind of feedback.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, that's been really insightful. Really good to see what you've done there with the Learn Extractor and how it could work, and kind of it's got me thinking how I could use that as well. So that's been great. And that's it for today. So thank you for watching. Do remember to like and subscribe if you're not already. Really useful. It helps this channel. And until the next one, we will see you later.
Thanks, everyone.